Welcome to the Risk and Resilience interviews. I'm Grant Kennedy and we have Nigel Owen with us today. Welcome, Nigel. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Grant, and thank you for having me.
No problem. So let's get straight into it then. If you could give us a little bit of a background about your previous roles, experience around communication, that would be great. And then we'll go into a few other conversations, discussions.
So yeah, I'm currently a strategic communications consultant. I've been in communications for 25 years now. A large part of that has been in the financial sector, around 13 years at Royal Bank of Scotland Group, running internal communications and PR teams there. Now currently in Dubai. Found my way back into banking communications again. I worked on the first bank merger in Saudi Arabia just recently, and I continue to work with that bank. And also started to work with telecoms companies, quite a few tech firms as well, which have been quite interesting, and as well as the government here in United Arab Emirates. So yeah, so quite a broad communication specialist, I'd say, at this point.
Exactly, and those skills are transferable to whatever organisation we know we've been working alongside you with that as well. So maybe if we just go straight in to get a little bit of understanding of yourself and how you like to be communicated with as well. But what's the riskiest thing that you've ever done, and what makes you resilient?
I probably like that recently. I would say that it was that bank merger, because it was in Saudi Arabia, a country which I had absolutely no experience. And I think one of the first sort of rules I always tell people when we're looking at communications is know your audience. So I absolutely did not know my audience there, in terms of like the general population who would need to sort of communicate with, the media, only a very small contact with their local media until that point. And it's a totally new sort of culture and way of working. And obviously never worked on a merger before. So that's quite a big thing to say yes to when it's your first time. But yeah, it was good. I think you need to test yourself. So I kind of just sort of threw myself in and I was over there 3 days a week, and I just listened to as many people and met as many people as possible and just absorbed myself in as much as I can. And that, I think, to make yourself sort of resilient, I think you can't wing it. you have to know what you're doing, and a lot of that comes from sort of listening. I think a lot of communication is about sort of listening. So the more people I could meet, the more I could listen, the more research I could do, the more I could understand my audience and their needs. And then obviously my banking background all came into use there, and my sort of PR and internal comms sort of stuff. But yeah, that was a risky thing. Is like, I'm going to go in and do a very big communications job where you've got thousands of customers in either bank that need to know what's going on for that day when you pull the lever and two banks become one. Everyone kind of needs to know how everything works, and everything has to be in place. Everyone has to be communicated. It probably got scary if I added up how many communications we had to do, because there was a lot. Till it merged, it was those communications on both sides and different for either bank as well. So yeah, it was good. But yeah, in terms of sort of preparing yourself for that, it's just throw yourself into it and listen to it and do the work, and you can't wing stuff like that. You have to make sure you're prepared.
Exactly. I think your key thing you're saying there is listening, a major part of risk communication, and also you're saying understand your audience, and when you're implementing good risk management, it's a key part, isn't it, to understand the persona, understand your internal audience, understand who your key stakeholders are. Have you mapped them out? Have you understood the differences in what they're looking for? What do you need from them? The two-way communication, and also understanding that's obviously on a wide, large macro environment, but also understanding the individuals you're communicating with. So maybe the kind of two questions will lead into maybe linking back to some of the work you've did with RBS, maybe some of the experience you could share as well during those difficult periods. But thinking about the strong building blocks of good internal risk communications, what do you think that means? How do you go about doing that? What did you learn from your previous experiences? And then we'll finish up maybe looking into incident management communications when things are going wrong. So if you could build through that, that would be really, really interesting to
there was a lot of risk to manage on the merger side. Is what if we need to make sure people have the information in a way that they can understand to avoid a bit of a catastrophe and everyone being confused and the merger being wrong. But at RBS, on the internal communication side, did a lot of risk-related stuff. Spent my initial years there in communication in private banking, which is heavily regulated. Compliance is a massive thing there. So you make a mistake there and it's big fines. So yeah, I mean, just day to day, just the same best practice applies. Is just remember, it's all human to human communication. And when I see large companies like banks that I've worked with quite often, it's very easy to say, okay, we need you to know these risk policies and procedures so we can tick the box and say, okay, everyone has been told and we're safe. You're not safe if you just go with a great big stack of papers or like a communication that's like, if you print it off a mile long and go, well, you've been told now, so our job's done. It's not, you've got to do this in a way that works for a human being. And I say that more than ever now, I think we kind of, these things have evolved our attention spans to less than a goldfish now. So you kind of need to be entertaining, even with the most sort of boring communications, potentially. You have to find a way of making them impactful and being creative about them and being really concise and taking away the jargon and communicate as much like you would do in normal life, and don't get carried away with this work jargon. I think that's quite an easy thing to do. One of the areas I think is risk, where you can sort of fall into sort of jargon. You lose people, and not everyone understands all the terminology and stuff. So keep the language really simple, impactful. There's a sort of golden rule: is communicate as if you keep communicating to a 12-year-old. That's how, say, like the British media kind of work to that rule. Then you haven't got too much room for people to get confused about stuff. Big pictorial as well, like again, that's the way we've gone now. I remember back in the day where the Financial Times wouldn't have a picture in it. Now there's a picture on every page. The communications have evolved, and when you get in larger organizations, you tend to find it's not quite as evolved as much as it has in the outside world. So try and make your communications match the stuff that you would read outside of work, I think is a good general rule. And just don't fall into those traps. And I think that the most common one I see is just giving reams of stuff to people when it comes to risk and say, you've been told. It doesn't mean that they've understood.
Yeah, and so almost taking the lessons from media, from marketing, from branding, and using those techniques to be able to communicate the key risks in the organisation. Like you say, we it's evolving quite a lot now, but yeah, certainly when we started out using this sort of language, it was very much, here's the policy, read it, here's the reams of continuity documents, information, and also it's trying to target, you talked about the right people, communicating to them at the right level. Not everybody needs to know every piece of key risk information. It's about who is it you're targeting in that organisation, and getting them involved, and I think that's important.
Yeah, always tailor it to your audience. Really, really important.
And as part of that, how do you go about doing that? Do you tend to make stakeholder maps, for example, and thinking about, this is who we need to communicate, this is what they need to hear, and even thinking about the different ways that these people like to be communicated with? What sort of level of detail would you tend to go into?
Your groups in your organisation that you need to speak to, and if your job is the communications manager, you kind of should know it's your job to know how to communicate to these groups, but understand what their communication need is. Go, here's all our groups, here's the things that they need to know, and don't tell them things that they don't need to know. Again, going back to my point, it's just be super efficient and impactful of them. Is just understand, okay, they need to know this in order to do this. That group, the other group might need to know something, so just tell them that. Don't give them everything. Mm-hmm. Don't try and just do one communication for everyone, because you'll kind of probably lose everyone, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose you're saying you're the communication department out. You're a functional support to the various different teams, and often I see a disconnect between, say, the risk functions, the resilience functions, whatever they're called, with the communications department. And when I've seen it working really well, is that they work hand in hand. That they're very much planning what's going to be communicated through the year, where's the key risks, what's the calendar of events, how's that going to link into exercising, testing, the various different events that you might be having, and really working together. So is that something that you, obviously I know you try to do that and do it well, but
you should remember is when you're, say, your risk department going to your communication department, you're one of many departments going to them. They have everyone coming to them every single day to communicate stuff. 90% of those people are coming at the last minute. They worked on a project and go, okay, it's ready now, and then start screaming at the company, this needs to go out tomorrow. You're not going to get great communications that way. And as you just said, their plan, you need to do is go to them as early as possible. The earlier you go to them, the more you can get from them in terms of creative. They've got time to put some thought into it and get design involved. You buy yourself that time to make the communications impactful. If you go last minute, then you're an annoying customer to your communications team. So yeah, have an early chat, even if it's just an early heads up, just give me a heads up, we're thinking of doing something like this. When can we chat? That can make a...
Also, you say exactly, and also you say impactful. You want the communication, whatever that happens to be awareness of cyber threats, awareness of continuity, whatever that happens to be in that particular organisation. But also to make sure that the more you're planning, the more you're prepared, the more engaged and the more professional the output will be, whether that be communication calendars or posters or really professional videos, taking it to that next level, taking it to where people are proud to be able to come into that company, from onboarding all the way through to people leaving the organization. Every element of it is looking and feeling more professional all the way through, rather than an afterthought.
Yeah, certain communication formats take a long time. Like animations can take a very long time to do. That's probably that takes longer than probably anything else if you're doing quite a good quality one. Video, you've got to film it, you've got to edit it, then you probably have some design work on the video as well. So these things take time to sort of build that in. So that would, I would say, be sort of the day-to-day stuff. On the crisis communication, this is quite a different animal to sort of deal with. It's probably the most fun bit of my job, I'd say. And I had a lot of fun when I was at RBS, because I was in the press office there when everything went wrong and they were bailed out with the taxpayer money. So we become public enemy number one, the sort of kind of enemy of the media. We were there sort of one of the top targets for many years. And same with the politicians as well, and government. We were under attack and people were looking for issues with us, and they found them very regularly. So it was crisis after crisis after crisis. So we got really good in the press office because we had a lot of experience of it, and there kind of is no real substitute for that. But there are some things that you can do to be good at it. I think it's very difficult, I'd say, for a company that maybe experiences its first crisis to be really good at it, because it's a very difficult thing. But there's certain dynamics there that it's important to remember. I think probably the most important one is remember what is the big issue here. The big issue is, regardless of the crisis, is retaining the trust of your customers and your staff and your shareholders. So it's retaining that trust. So everything you do has to be about that. What usually happens is the response is fixing the problem and seeing what you can get away with minimal damage. And people don't think about, okay, have we done enough to win back trust? And certainly the longer your crisis goes on, the more damaging it is to that level of trust. So that's when, if something, say you might rectify something in a day, okay, everyone will go, okay, everyone makes mistakes. But if it's a big issue that rumbles on, becomes quite a big high profile issue, then you might need some form of transformational remedy at the end. So you might have to show that you've done something big to change for the better, so you won't make that same mistake. So that's always something to remember. A lot of companies, when they go through these big crises, they'll fix it and say, okay, it's fixed now, everyone, and then they leave it there. But the trust is still broken. So always remember your customers. A great thing, a good and a bad thing in a crisis is social media, because that's where your reputation can get killed very quickly. But it is your opportunity to see the impact of the crisis on the people that are important to you, your customers. So make sure you've got a mechanism to you're reporting in to the people that need to know in the organization, what are they saying now? So you need to be feeding in every sort of hour or so, this is what the top things people are saying now. When you have a crisis, a lot of the time, the truth will come from your customers before you get it internally. They will let you know immediately, while people internally are looking around trying to understand what has actually gone on. You'll probably find most of the truth, certainly early on, from social media. So make sure you've got a mechanism to listen and to be really concise and feed that back up to the people that need to know. And also, I do find leadership teams are particularly great in a crisis as well. So don't follow your normal protocols for signing things off, going through hierarchy. You don't have the time to do that. Quite often, if there's an issue in an area, that the person responsible for that area is naturally going to get really nervous, might deliberately go a bit quiet, and you won't get the answers that you want. And then you're trying to get a communication out to help manage the issue, and it'll sit there for an hour or 2 hours, which you just can't allow to happen. Really good example, we remember when the US Airways flight landed in the Hudson River. Within 15 minutes, I had a social media post out. So that is a big complicating business. They can do that in 15 minutes. So there's no reason why any other company can't do that. But you can't do that if you follow your normal protocols. So have that sort of framework for communicating in a crisis. You need to be extremely fast straight away. And you need to keep communicating and communicating with empathy, keeping people informed, letting them know you're working really hard to fix it. Even if you don't really have an update from what you said an hour or two ago, say something, show that you're still listening, you still care about it. They're really, really important things. And a lot of companies do struggle to get that first communication out. Imagine like a fire burning. You've got more chance of putting it out while it's small than letting it burn. And you can't literally burn the house down. We've seen big crisis of just the companies haven't survived at the end of it. So yeah, that's one way.
Exactly, it's being proactive.
Yeah.
And I think, I know that we have to bring this to a conclusion now. We've only really just scratched the surface and communications pre, during, after an incident. And, that's what we'll delve into in more detail through the various workshops and academies we have working alongside you. So, thank you very much for your time. I think we could have talked for many hours about this sort of topic and how it evolved and how it's so important to organisations that we work with. So many thanks, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.